It happened in broad daylight, not at night, not under shadows, but under a clear sky when the sun was still high enough for no one to mistake what they saw. Hundreds of people stood together in an open field, heads bowed, hands clasped, the soft murmur of prayer rising and falling like a single breath. There was no stage, no performance, no wind strong enough to move a leaf. And then, without warning, something began to fall. At first it was only one, a single rose petal, drifting down slowly, almost gently, landing on the sleeve of a woman in the front row. People looked up. Another petal followed, then another. Within seconds, the air above them filled with soft red and pink petals, floating, turning, descending as if released from nowhere. They did not scatter. They did not blow sideways. They simply fell. No one screamed. No one ran. The prayers stopped, and in that sudden, shared silence, a question hung heavier than the petals themselves. Where did the roses come from, and why did they fall during prayer? The gathering took place just outside the town of St. Augustine Ridge, a quiet suburban community on the edge of Central Florida. It was a Saturday afternoon in late May, the kind of day locals describe as calm but expectant. Warm sunlight, a pale blue sky, and clouds stretched thin like brushstrokes. The location was an open grassy field behind a modest parish church, chosen simply because it could hold more people than the building itself. Folding chairs were arranged in loose rows. Some families brought blankets. Others stood at the edges, preferring distance over closeness. By the time the prayer began, nearly 400 people had gathered. They were not pilgrims drawn by headlines. They were ordinary neighbors, parents, retirees, teenagers, nurses coming off night shifts, construction workers still in boots. Many had come carrying quiet intentions, illnesses not spoken aloud, grief still fresh, fears too heavy to name. There was no music at first, no microphones, only the sound of voices reciting the Rosary in unison. Steady, measured, almost restrained. Children whispered beside their parents. A breeze barely stirred the trees, but the air itself felt still, as if the afternoon had paused to listen. Nothing about the moment suggested drama. No one looked up at the sky. No one expected a sign. It was simply another prayer gathering in the middle of an ordinary day. Seconds before the ordinary was interrupted. Among the crowd stood a woman named Elena Morales, 42 years old, her hands folded so tightly the knuckles had turned white. She had arrived alone and chosen a place near the side, not hidden but not seen either. Those who noticed her later would remember her stillness more than anything else. Elena had lost her son 8 months earlier. Daniel was 16, a high school junior, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of boy teachers described as kind but easily overlooked. One ordinary afternoon, a distracted driver ran a red light. The call from the hospital came before sunset. By nightfall, Daniel was gone. After the funeral, people checked in. Meals were dropped off. Messages were sent. Then, as weeks passed, the world slowly resumed its rhythm, everyone's life continuing except hers. Elena stopped sleeping through the night. She stopped attending Mass. She kept Daniel's room exactly the same, as if order could somehow resist absence. Prayer, once familiar, now felt dangerous. Every time she tried, the same question rose uninvited. Why would God allow this? The prayer gathering had not been her idea. A neighbor had mentioned it gently, without expectation. Elena resisted at first. She did not come seeking a miracle. She did not come believing anything would change. She came because staying home felt unbearable. Standing in the field that afternoon, Elena did not lift her eyes. She followed the rosary mechanically, the words passing through her lips without conviction. Inside there was no peace, only exhaustion. If she was honest, her prayer was simple and raw. If you are there, do something, anything, or let me know I'm not alone. She did not look toward the sky. She did not expect comfort. She only knew she could not carry the silence by herself anymore. And this was the last place she knew to bring it. A few rows behind Elena stood Ryan Collins, 17 years old, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his hoodie. He had come reluctantly, pulled along by his grandmother, who believed prayer worked best when said together. Ryan did not argue. He simply did not expect anything to happen. He hadn't always been skeptical. When he was younger, faith had felt simple. Sunday Mass, short prayers before school, the comfort of answers he never questioned. But over the past 2 years, that certainty had unraveled. His parents' divorce, a friend's overdose, the slow realization that life rarely followed the rules he'd been taught. Ryan had learned to trust what could be measured. If something couldn't be proven, it didn't hold much weight. As the rosary began, he watched the crowd instead of joining in. He noticed how people closed their eyes, how some whispered intentions with visible urgency, how others looked tired rather than hopeful. To him, it felt like a collective habit, familiar words repeated because no one knew what else to do. He scanned the field almost unconsciously. No banners, no hidden speakers, no drones hovering above, just an open sky and a group of people asking for help in different ways. Ryan told himself he was there as an observer. If nothing happened, it would confirm what he already believed. That prayer offered comfort, not answers. And if something unusual did occur, he assumed there would be an explanation. There always was. He shifted his weight and glanced upward briefly. Squinting against the sunlight, the sky was empty. Whatever people hoped for that afternoon, Ryan was certain of one thing. If anything extraordinary occurred, it wouldn't be because of prayer. At least that's what he believed. Minutes before, his certainty would be quietly tested. Near the small folding table that held a portable speaker and a box of printed prayer sheets stood Michael Turner, 38 years old, one of the parish volunteers responsible for organizing the gathering. Unlike most of those present, Michael was not focused inward. His attention stayed fixed on the details: sound levels, spacing, safety, timing. He had helped coordinate dozens of parish events over the years. This one was no different. There had been no special announcements, no promises of signs or blessings. The gathering had been promoted quietly. Word of mouth, a short notice after Mass, a single post on the parish bulletin board. Michael had made sure of that. Anything that hinted at spectacle made him uneasy. Before the prayers began, he had walked the perimeter of the field himself. No decorations, no flowers, no elevated platforms. The parish guidelines were clear. Outdoor prayer events were to remain simple, transparent, and free of anything that could be misunderstood. Michael had checked the weather forecast twice that morning. Clear skies, light breeze, nothing unusual. He knew exactly what had been brought in: folding chairs, water coolers, pamphlets, a small first aid kit. That was all. As the rosary continued, Michael stood off to the side, scanning the area out of habit. He noticed how still the air had become. He noticed the way the crowd had settled into a quiet rhythm. What he did not notice was anything overhead, because there was nothing there to notice. Later, when questions would arise, Michael would repeat the same words calmly and consistently. There was no setup, no release mechanism, no flowers on site. At that moment, however, he was unaware that his careful planning, meant to keep the afternoon ordinary, was about to become the strongest evidence that what followed had not been arranged at all. And that realization was only seconds away. It began so subtly that many would later question whether they had imagined it. A woman near the front paused mid-prayer, her lips parting slightly as she drew in a deeper breath. The air carried something unfamiliar, soft, floral, unmistakably sweet. She turned her head, expecting to see flowers nearby. There were none. Within moments, others noticed it too. Heads shifted, brows furrowed. A few people inhaled again, slower this time, trying to identify the scent. It was not grass, not perfume, not sunscreen warmed by the sun. It was the clear, delicate fragrance of roses. The timing was strange. The gathering was outdoors, surrounded by open field and scattered trees. No rose bushes grew nearby. No one had brought bouquets. The scent did not drift past and disappear. It lingered, settling evenly across the space as if the air itself had changed. The rosary continued, but its rhythm faltered. Voices softened. Some people stopped speaking altogether, unsure whether to break the moment or remain still. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered a question she didn't answer. Michael, the volunteer, glanced around instinctively. He checked the edges of the field, scanning for a source: someone carrying flowers, A passing vehicle, anything that might explain it. There was nothing. The breeze that had stirred the trees earlier faded completely. The air grew still, heavy with fragrance, yet strangely gentle. Those who had been distracted found themselves suddenly focused. Those who had been restless grew quiet. Elena noticed the scent without lifting her head. It reminded her of the roses Daniel used to bring home from the grocery store on Mother's Day. Never expensive, always sincere. Her throat tightened before she understood why. Ryan frowned slightly unsettled. Scents had sources. This one didn't. The prayers did not stop, but something had shifted, and before anyone could speak or question what they were sensing, the first petal fell. At first, no one noticed the moment it began. The rosary was midway through another decade when something small brushed against a woman's forearm near the front row. She looked down instinctively, expecting an insect or a falling leaf. Resting against her sleeve was a single rose petal. It was fresh, unbroken. A soft shade of deep pink, its edges slightly curved as if just separated from the flower. She froze, unsure whether to move it or leave it where it lay. For a brief second, she assumed it must have fallen from somewhere nearby. Then she looked up. Others began to follow her gaze. Heads tilted back slowly, one after another, eyes narrowing against the daylight. The sky above them was clear. No trees overhead, no branches, no visible source. Another petal drifted down, turning gently in the air before landing near the center aisle. This time, someone whispered. A third petal followed. The prayers wavered, then fell into silence. Not abruptly, but naturally, as if everyone had reached the same unspoken decision at once. No one spoke loudly. No one moved from their place. The crowd seemed to hold its breath. Michael stepped forward a few paces, scanning upward and then across the field. His training pushed him to find a cause, a direction, a point of origin. There was none. Ryan's skepticism sharpened into focus. He watched carefully now, tracking the petal's descent. It did not fall quickly. It did not drift sideways. It descended straight down, slow and deliberate. Elena finally lifted her eyes. Her lips trembled, but no words came. The petal at her feet felt impossibly gentle for something that had fallen from the open sky. Then, without warning or announcement, the air above the gathering began to fill, not with one, not with three, but with many. What happened next unfolded without urgency, yet with a gravity that held everyone in place. The petals did not suddenly pour down. They arrived gradually, one after another, until the space above the gathering seemed alive with motion. Soft reds, pale pinks, and faint whites drifted through the sunlight, turning slowly as they fell. Each petal followed its own quiet path, unhurried, untouched by wind. People stood frozen. Some raised their hands instinctively, as if to confirm what their eyes were seeing. Others covered their mouths. A few knelt where they stood, overcome before they understood why. No one shouted. No one tried to capture the moment at first. The stillness felt sacred, as though noise itself would break something fragile. The petals did not fall beyond the gathering. They descended only over the field where people were praying, no farther, no wider, forming a gentle boundary that seemed almost intentional. Outside that space, the grass remained untouched. Michael moved again, this time with urgency. He scanned the sky, then the surrounding buildings, then the tree line. His mind raced through possibilities, hidden nets, elevated releases, passing aircraft, but every explanation dissolved as quickly as it formed. There was nothing above them. Ryan stood motionless, his eyes locked upward. He counted without realizing it. 10, 20, more than he could follow. The petals fell too evenly, too softly, to match anything he understood. His certainty, once solid, now felt thin and unstable. Elena felt one land in her open palm. It was cool, real, fragile. Her breath caught, and for the first time in months, her chest did not ache with resistance. Tears blurred her vision, but she did not wipe them away. She did not ask questions. She simply stood there, holding the petal as if it might disappear if she moved. Around her, the crowd began to change. Some whispered prayers through tears. Others said nothing at all. A child laughed softly, not in disbelief, but in wonder. A man near the back removed his hat and pressed it to his chest. The petals continued to fall for what felt like minutes. long enough for disbelief to fade and something deeper to take its place. When they finally slowed, then stopped, the field was transformed. Chairs, shoulders, open hands, and grass were lightly covered, as if the earth itself had been gently blessed. No announcement followed, no explanation arrived. Only silence, thick, reverent, and shared. In that silence, hundreds of people understood the same thing in different ways. Whatever this was, it had not come to entertain. It had come to be received. The silence did not last long. Almost instinctively, people began to look around. Not upward this time, but at one another. Eyes met. Quiet questions formed without being spoken. What they had just experienced demanded more than emotion. It demanded explanation. Phones appeared, not all at once, but gradually. Several people began recording the field, the petals resting on shoulders and chairs, the clear sky overhead. The videos captured the same details from different angles. The absence of wind, the limited area where the petals had fallen, the ordinary afternoon light that left no room for shadows or illusion. Michael moved quickly but calmly, doing what he knew best, checking. He walked the perimeter again, this time with others following. They examined the trees, the nearby buildings, the church roof, the open sky above the field. No bags, no containers, no petals caught in branches, nothing that suggested preparation or release. A few parishioners searched the ground beyond the gathering. The grass there was untouched. Inside the field, petals lay scattered gently, as if placed by hand. Several witnesses spoke quietly among themselves, comparing what they had seen and smelled. Many mentioned the fragrance of roses that had arrived before the petals. Others noted how the fall had begun slowly, then spread evenly, without direction or force. Ryan replayed a short clip on his phone, watching the petal descend frame by frame. He paused at mid-air, searching for signs of drift, acceleration, or interference. There were none. The movement remained steady and vertical. Elena said nothing. She listened as others tried to make sense of it. In her hand, the petal she had caught remained intact, its color deep and unblemished. Later, some would suggest explanations. Unusual air currents, coincidence, collective imagination. But standing there in the open field, those explanations felt thin. Too many people had seen too much, from too many angles. No single witness claimed to understand what had happened, but together they shared something harder to dismiss. There had been no setup, no signal, no visible cause. Only an event witnessed in daylight, by hundreds, leaving behind questions that refused to fade. When it was clear that the petals were no longer falling, the crowd did not disperse. No one announced what to do next. There was no instruction to resume prayer or to conclude the gathering. Yet almost instinctively, people remained where they were, as if leaving too quickly might diminish what had just been received. Elena sank to her knees without realizing she had moved. The petal she had held slipped from her fingers onto the grass, joining the others. For the first time since her son's death, the weight in her chest loosened, not replaced by answers, but by something gentler. A quiet sense that her grief had been seen, that she had not been invisible in her pain. A few feet away, Ryan stood very still. He did not kneel. He did not pray aloud. But the certainty he had brought with him was gone. He felt it in the way his thoughts refused to organize themselves, in the way explanations no longer satisfied. He found himself whispering a single sentence under his breath, unsure to whom it was addressed. "I don't understand this." Around them, reactions varied but carried the same undertone. Some people wept openly. Others clasped hands with strangers. A few began praying again, softly this time, as if speaking to someone now undeniably present. Michael watched from the side, his clipboard forgotten. He felt both unsettled and grounded. Unsettled because nothing he knew explained what had happened. Grounded because his careful preparation had ruled out manipulation. The event had occurred despite his efforts to keep everything ordinary. Children gathered petals with reverence, asking permission before touching them. Adults allowed it, sensing that something about the moment deserved care. No one declared a miracle. No one made claims. Yet something unmistakable had shifted. The field no longer felt like just a place. It felt marked. And for many who stood there that afternoon, the question was no longer if something had happened, but how their lives would quietly respond to it once they went home. As the gathering slowly drew to a close, no one rushed to leave. People moved carefully, almost cautiously, as if the field itself had become fragile. Many bent down to pick up a single petal, not as a souvenir, but as a quiet acknowledgement of what they had witnessed. They chose them deliberately, one, sometimes two, leaving the rest undisturbed. Small envelopes appeared, folded tissues. A few prayer cards were repurposed to hold the petals safely. No one laughed. No one treated them lightly. The gestures were simple, restrained, and reverent. What lingered even more strongly than the sight was the scent. The fragrance of roses did not fade when the petals stopped falling. It remained in the air, subtle but unmistakable, drifting through the field long after the prayers had ended. People noticed it clinging to their hands, their clothing, the folds of fabric where petals had rested. Michael locked up the equipment nearly an hour later. The field was mostly empty by then, yet the scent still hovered, as if the space itself refused to return to normal. He paused before leaving, breathing in slowly, unsettled by how familiar and inexplicable it felt. Elena folded her petal carefully and placed it inside the small pocket of her wallet. It was not proof. It was not an answer. But it felt like a message she was not meant to analyze, only to keep. Ryan noticed the scent again as he sat in his grandmother's car. The windows rolled down. He checked his clothes, half expecting to find a flower tucked somewhere. There was nothing there, and yet the fragrance remained. By evening, stories had begun to spread quietly. Text messages, short calls, hushed retellings. But the most persistent detail was always the same. The roses had left, but their presence had not. And for many, that lingering scent became the softest, clearest reminder that the afternoon had not ended when the field emptied. In the days that followed, people tried to understand what the roses meant. Some searched for explanations rooted in science or coincidence. Others avoided explanations altogether, choosing instead to sit with the experience as it was. The parish did not issue statements. No claims were made from the pulpit. The silence felt intentional, respectful of something that did not need to be defined to be real. Within the Christian tradition, roses have long carried meaning, symbols of love offered without condition, of prayers given form, of beauty that appears where it is least expected. In devotion to the Virgin Mary, the rose has often been associated with consolation rather than spectacle, with presence rather than proof. What happened in the field did not demand belief, it invited reflection. For some, the petals became a reminder that grief is seen, even when it feels unanswered. For others, they represented a gentle interruption, an insistence that faith is not always loud or dramatic, but often quiet, precise, and personal. Elena found herself returning to prayer, not with certainty, but with openness. She no longer asked why. She asked only for strength to carry what remained. Ryan did not suddenly adopt the faith he had questioned, but he stopped dismissing it. He began to allow room for mystery, for the possibility that not everything meaningful could be measured or explained. And for many who had stood beneath the falling petals, the event reshaped their understanding of signs. A sign, they realized, does not always point outward. Sometimes it points inward, toward a space where faith has been waiting patiently to be noticed. The roses did not answer every question. They simply reminded those who witnessed them that belief, like prayer, is often less about certainty and more about trust. What happened that afternoon in the open field did not come with instructions. There was no voice from the sky, no explanation offered to the crowd. Only rose petals falling in daylight during prayer, witnessed by hundreds who would return to their ordinary lives carrying an extraordinary memory. Some would keep a petal tucked inside a book or wallet. Others would keep only the memory. But all would carry the same question forward. What does this moment ask of me? If this story stirred something in you, comfort, curiosity, or even doubt, you are not alone. Moments like these are not meant to convince, but to invite reflection. If you have experienced a sign, a quiet intervention, or a moment of faith that changed you, we invite you to share it in the comments. Your story may be the encouragement someone else is searching for. And if you wish to continue exploring stories of hope, mystery, in the gentle presence of the Virgin Mary in modern life, subscribe to Av Miracles, because sometimes the most powerful signs fall softly and stay with us long after they are gone.